Alright, let's finish up the cash budget. We just have to make 1, 2, 3, 4 assumptions down here before we start because they're going to tell us what to do. We need to know minimal acceptable cash. So I'm just going to look at the balance sheet of Yum and see how much cash they tend to hold. So if you look at their quarterly balance sheets here, they hold between $578 million and $861 million on hand at a given time. If you go to annual data, it goes as high as $1.2 billion on hand. And so we can make a safe assumption that they're going to hold at least $500 million at a given time, and maybe as much as, say, $1.5 billion. And then this will be our anchors for when we need to raise cash or when we need to reduce the amount of cash on hand by investing short term. Our borrowing rate, we can just put something in here. So if they borrow right now, they're probably on an annual basis paying something like 2%. And maybe they can lend as high as 1%, although that might be optimistic. With current interest rates, that's okay. These numbers could be played with pretty easily. And then we're going to divide each of those by 12 just to convert them to monthly rates so that when we feed our short-term investing up here or borrowing, our interest expense is off of a monthly accrual. Because when you borrow in this month, then you hold it for this month, you're going to pay interest in this month just for that month, not for the entire year 2%, but just for the 17 basis points here. So now we need beginning cash balance, and then we can just wire all this up. So beginning cash balance is just going to come from the balance sheet. So at the end of 2013, we have $573 million in cash according to the balance sheet. So at the end of December, that's what this should be. And then the rest of these will feed from the end of the month. So collections minus disbursements, we've already done that. So here's collections minus disbursements from before. So we have that, and then unadjusted cash balance just sums those two. Alright, so that at the end of January we only have $200 million on hand. We'd like to have at least 500. So I need the current borrowing to look at this and tell me how much I need to borrow or invest. It will go negative, negative borrowing or investing if we have too much cash on hand. So I have to write an if statement for that. And we're going to need 3 possible outcomes. So we're either below our minimum or above our maximum or in between. Okay? Or basically not below or above. So actually it'll not just be in between, it include 500 and 1500, but I can just write a simple or not, I don't know if simple is the right word, the nested ifs where we have 3 possible logical outcomes. So equals if our unadjusted cash balance is below our minimum acceptable cash, and I'm going to lock that because our minimum acceptable cash won't change, but as we drag this over, our unadjusted cash balance will change. So if that is true, someone hit comments going to say, what do I do if that's true? Well, in this case, I need to go from 200, our unadjusted cash balance, up to our $500 minimum. And to do that, I can just say, okay, I need to get here. I subtract off where I'm already at. Okay. Oh, I need to lock that B35 too, because that won't change. And so what that'll do is it'll take this minus this. In this case, 500 minus 200 is 300. And then we'll borrow 300. 300 plus what we have, 200, will get us back to where we need to be. 500 is our minimum. Okay, so that's our first part. And then it says value if false, and we have to write another if. If our value here is above our maximum, so now we have too much cash on hand. We don't want to have that much cash on hand. What do I do? Well, again, positive is going to be borrowing, negative investing. So I want to invest any excess. So if this is greater than 1,500, I can take the 1,500 and subtract what's here. And now 1,500 minus something bigger than 1,500 will be negative. So it'll take anything above this amount and invest it. Okay. And so that'll take care of that. And then I can comma. If it's not below 500 and if it's not above 1,500, I just put 0. I'm not going to borrow at all. I'm just going to leave my cash the way it is. Enter. Probably need another parenthesis there, so it got grumpy, but that's okay. And so then my ending cash balance just adds my borrowing plus my unadjusted cash. I get back to 500. Okay, and you can always test this, right? So if our unadjusted cash was 600, it shouldn't borrow any because we're between our minimum and maximum. If it's at 1600, you know, we have 100 in excess cash, so it'll invest that or negative borrowing to get us back to our maximum. Okay, Control Z, Control Z. All right. So anyway, there's our end, and then we just say, okay, next month we start with this amount, and we work from there. We can just drag this over, and then we can just drag all of this over, so we can replicate this all over now, and it should look like that. And then I'm going to do cumulative borrowing. So if we had some short-term in place, and I guess we could go to the balance sheet, maybe pull their short-term borrowing, but for now this will be fine. You know, the idea is any previous borrowing, D32, plus any current borrowing, right here in our current borrowing line, will tell us our cumulative borrowing. So we borrow 300 in January. When I drag it over now, it's going to say 300 in January, plus 27 in February, so now I'm at 327. I don't borrow anymore, I'm still at 327, etc. until I get to here, 41, now I'm at 368, etc. So it's just accumulating our borrowings. Again, if we have excess cash in a month, so for like right here, we have that 1600 in unadjusted cash, I'm going to go over the maximum down here. It'll pay 100 of we'll do $100, $100 million in this case of investing, which will pay down our cumulative borrow. So it'll take last month's cumulative borrow minus our short-term investing or our excess and reduce that. You know, and if it goes high enough, then the amount of excess will actually pay all the short-term borrowing off, and now we'll go negative, and now we're investing instead of borrowing. So that's the idea. Okay, so we have cumulative borrow. And then cumulative interest expense. So we won't, you know, if we borrow 300 million here, we got to start paying interest on it the next month. And so actually, first we got to wire this up here. So for now, I'm just going to put the formula here. So the short-term interest expense is going to equal another if statement. So if our borrowing is positive, so if this cell right here in D, if this is greater than 0, then I need to pay on that money our borrowing rate, monthly borrowing rate. Okay? And again, if that is below 0, so if this is below 0, then I'm investing. Then I get to make some money, and I get to make how much ever we have invested times our monthly lending rate. Okay, and oh, we gotta lock all our D's here, don't we? Lock our 38, lock our 37, but not our 32 because we're gonna float month to month and pick up that cumulative borrow. Okay, and if it's neither of those things, so if it's not above or below 0, then I'm not going to have any interest expense or income. Okay, so it should be 0, and then as I drag this over, now it's going to say, oh, we had 300 in cumulative borrowing, and we can add some decimals, which accumulates. It means we pay $500,000 in interest in February for that short-term borrowing. Okay, and so we can leave it like that, something like that. Okay. And then cumulative interest expense, if we want to look how much interest we're going to accumulate again, we can just look at previous amount plus current amount of interest. So we can just run that over like that, and then it'll tell us how much we paid total in interest by the end of the year. So $6.5 million. All right. And again, if we go over if we have excess cash and we go to investing, what's going to happen is, so again, if we have like $2 billion in excess cash here, it's going to pay back all our current borrowing. Now our interest is instead of being an expense, we're going to have an investment, so it's actually going to turn into income, and our cumulative interest will start declining instead of increasing. Okay, just in this particular example, we never have all that much extra cash. So Not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It might just mean they're efficiently handling their cash. But anyway, that's the idea. And that's all you got to do to wire the bottom of that sheet. We'll see you next time.